you taking the time at different hours of the day. And I know that we are a little bit UNDP heavy, but we will not be focused just on UNDP processes. This is more open than that. So we welcome people from other organizations as well. I want to just jump right in then. And please, I'll say this session is being recorded. So it's available afterwards. Want to revisit the discussion, or if you want to share this with any of your colleagues, you're more than welcome. But please do know it's being recorded. And so the objectives of this learning stream are an exploration into issues and themes around monitoring and evaluation. And this is really monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Learning's that next step. It's a practical rather than theoretical exploration. And it's going to be really geared towards learning from each other and sharing our own experiences. So please don't be shy about jumping in if you have something to contribute. We want to focus on methods and approaches rather than on any specific reporting requirements. And I think that's especially relevant given that we are so UNDP heavy. You know, we don't need to really focus on the specific, needs of our organization. Excuse me. And this really is geared towards the needs and interests of the participants. So thank you very much for everyone who completed the learning survey. I really appreciate that. It helped me think about how to frame today's session, and that will also be really helpful going forward for any further sessions. So today we're going to keep it pretty simple. I want to go over very quickly some basic principles around M&E and why we care to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page. And I know many of you are going to be much more advanced than this, but just as a baseline. And then we're going to have a discussion around two themes. One is challenges, and we're going to work together to find some solutions, and then how we learn from M&E. So very quickly, the first step that we need to think about with monitoring evaluation is that we need to know where we're starting in order to know if it's made any difference, what we're doing. So we need to have a baseline, a midterm, and a terminal. Midterm, there can be more than one midterm. It could be every year, but you need to be tracking data throughout the intervention. And in order to do that, we need SMART indicators. I've seen different words attached to the different letters at various times, but I think this one works nicely in that SMART indicators are specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, relevant, and trackable. So what does that mean? One example I can think of is we've seen the results around reporting of sexual violence, for example, that the numbers of incidences being reported are higher. That could mean that there are more incidences, or it could mean that they're being reported more, right? So an indicator, you need to be really careful when you're thinking about what you're measuring and how you're trying to measure it. Other things might be really just the absolute perfect indicator to get to what you're trying to measure. But if you don't have access to the data, or it's too expensive, for example, then it's not attainable. So it can be challenging to think about the best indicators to use, and that can be an ongoing process also. And then so once we collect that data, then we need to look at it, analyze it, and assess it. So here I'm going to ask for some ideas from all of you. So just what are some ideas why we monitor and evaluate, or why would it be important? Does anyone want to volunteer? So, Miriam, I think maybe you're speaking, but you might be muted.
usted ya no está silencioso. Okay, it's in order to know the impact of the project.
Mm-hmm.
It's one reason for monitoring and evaluate.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think that helps to monitor and evaluate, and at the end to adapt, you know, the actions. And but I think also it helps to create ownership of the project. Because if you are tracking your impact, then also you understand better where you are doing your impact, and it creates this ownership feeling, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Vanessa, did you want to say something?
Hi, Colleen. Yeah, I just want to say that it's very important, as we need to know how the project is going. No, it's the way to and for Unity, it's like the way to show the if the project is going successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and if I can add on that, it's also important to know how the project is going, like during the implementation. To, for example, if something is not on track, then it's a way to ask questions. Okay, why are we not achieving our target, and try to change the intervention and understand the issues.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this has been covered in a few of the comments, but the importance of M&E in adaptive management of the projects and the program. And we had a M&E workshop recently that said if a program is managed well, there's little to no boundary between M&E and program management. And I think it's a really interesting challenge, is like operational data versus M&E data. Like, is it the same thing? And if it's not, then how is it different?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Those are all really great points. And you'll see on the screen, you know, I came up with just a couple really quickly, which you've hit on almost all of them. And I think, to your point, Christine and Sandra, what you were saying too about being adaptive. I mean, I think, you know, feeding the learning from the monitoring and evaluation that we do back into the existing project is that results-based management piece that's so important, and that's so acutely linked to effective project management. So it's absolutely a key part of just project management in general. And the other piece that there are a couple pieces no one picked up on here, which is contributing to the field of knowledge in general. You know, we go to all of this work and we put these projects together and we spend years working on them. And then that's great if we can make a positive difference in a specific community or watershed or legal framework or whatever it is that we're working on. But if we don't share that knowledge, then, you know, then other people have to sort of go through the same learning curve that we did. So contributing to the field of knowledge is a really important part. And then also, of course, we can't forget that we all have project donors, funders who want some information back from us. So this obviously is how we feed into reporting as well. I think that's all I wanted to say right now about the sort of general purpose. So we're going to move into what some challenges might be in M&E. There are many, many challenges that one might face, and I just picked a handful that I have found in my own work, my own direct experience, and different phases of a project. So in the design phase, back to indicators, how do you choose the right one? Implementation, how do you monitor the chosen indicators, right? So we've, for example, in the GGP project that Aileen mentioned, there's this production project focused on different countries, and the results framework was written during project design with a number of indicators that said TBD, to be determined, how we're actually going to collect this information. So then you start the project and you're like, okay, great. So here we know what we want to measure, but we have really no idea what ministry we're going to be working with, where we're going to collect the data from, how often it's published. Do we need to be like collecting core samples? Or, so it can be something that starts here, and then maybe you enter the process down the line and you're like, oh shoot, something started before and now I'm jumping into the middle and I need to figure out how to move forward. So, and then in reporting, I think we probably all faced this, that it's time to turn in your annual report or your quarterly progress report, and you just don't have the information. So how do you move forward with that? Or you were expecting a report from someone and they didn't have the information to provide to you. Anyway, so what I'd like for you to do now, if you don't mind, is to have everyone take 2 minutes and think of 1 challenge, 3 challenges, however many, that you have faced in your work. And it could be in any area of project design, implementation, reporting, coordination, whichever. And then think about how you have addressed or resolved that challenge. So I'll give you a couple minutes and then we'll reconvene momentarily. Okay, so finish up what you're working on there. And does anyone want to share one of the challenges that you have faced? And then what we'll do is please share. It could be something that you're facing now that you don't know how to resolve, or that you're looking for immediate suggestions on. It could be something that you have dealt with in the past that you feel like you did really well on, or that you feel like maybe you learned something about how to do it better. It could be very open. So Vanessa, I saw you waving. Why don't you kick us off?
Hi. Yeah, I have been working in my experience with UNDP for like almost 3 years, and what I have seen is that usually the projects does not allocate enough resources to M&E. So I think this is like a big challenge because we don't have like the resources and money and time to really work on monitoring and evaluation. So I think that in the project design and budget, we have to consider like a consultant or a fixed person to work during the entire project on M&E, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of coordination, a lot of requests, and usually you don't see that in the projects. That's one of the main challenges that I have seen in GCP in the initial stage.
Mm-hmm. So have you, in your 3 years, what has been done to address this? Or like, how have you worked around the lack of adequate resources?
Yeah, now just the experience. Now we have you that you work with us on M&E, but before we didn't have anyone that could work on that, and there was a lot of requests, and seeing that the other people doesn't have the time to work on it. So I think it's yeah, you have to include it in your budget as one priority. Yeah, to have money to fund some M&E consultant or staff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. That's a really good one. Does anyone have anything to add to that about that?
Yes,
No?
this is Sandra. I experienced the situation too, and I think it's a challenge, but also I think the team should incorporate the culture of monitoring and evaluation to their, to their daily activities. Because I know it's something painful and nobody wants to dedicate time to that, but I think it's part of team building, but also, I mean, it's not anymore something additional. It's something that we all must do. So we have to find the ways, to encourage other people to do the monitoring, and sometimes it's showing the results, because once that you see the results of the monitoring and evaluation, usually, I mean, it doesn't matter. Usually you feel very well, because at the end you can see your progress, or you can see what you should improve. So sometimes you don't need to hire or to have a consultant, but to find, I don't know, to have like a program or plan to integrate the monitoring in your own work.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that you've done that in the Costa Rica country office?
We haven't done it. I mean, we have to report as usual as UNDP in the platform. We are going to start with the action plan like in the next month, and then probably we will. I mean, we have to develop a monitoring system, so we haven't started yet, like with doing monitoring in this project. But in other experiences, I did it, and at the end it was something. I mean, every 3 months I have to contact everybody in the team and ask them for information, and then we have like monthly calls, so we share the progress. So we developed like an online system, so it was easier it was more like entertainment to, to put the information online. But yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Do you find that people use the online system that you've put in place?
Yes, because at the same time, it's also you can document all the information there. So you have your photos, your notes, the reports, everything that it's the evidence of the indicators. So it's a kind of like a file, like a Google Drive, something like that, or that you can have all the information that back up your monitoring.
Great. That's great. Does anyone else have a challenge that they thought of that they want to share? Miriam? Sorry, you're muted again.
What they have to do now?
Perfect.
Okay. I just finished the project, the wetland project, has a lot of indicators. But what was my challenge was that one of the indicators was to decrease in a 10% the area covered by invasive plants in one of the wetland, in one wetland. But what was the challenge? That I have not a baseline. I have not, a baseline was not done. And then how I went through to accomplish the product, then I have to develop. The first step was to develop a baseline in order to can measure in the 4 years project how to fulfill the indicators.
Yeah, right, exactly. And then there you are, year 2, you finally got your baseline, right? Or wherever you are in the project. Yeah. So you just finished that wetlands project, you said?
Yeah, I just finished. Now I am working on the productive landscape, another project.
Great. So how did you do that with the baseline, the missing baseline? What was the timeline like for you?
Yeah, I realized when I start, the first thing when I have a project, the first thing I have to do is to have clear the indicators and how I can measure all of the indicators. And then I had a technical unit, and then the first step was to develop the baseline or the wetland. The area was covered by the invasive plant, and then I reached the baseline in the first 6 months of the project, and then it led me to work in order to fulfill the indicators, and I did it. I made it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, one advantage, the sort of flip side of that coin, is that if you start with a baseline at the beginning of the project instead of the baseline that was conducted 2 years before when the project was being designed, you know that it's actually a real baseline, right? Because so much can change too between project design and when implementation actually begins, that it's actually really nice to have a baseline from the first 6 months of the project instead of 2 years before and then 2 years after it began. And, and then the people to be working with because you just used them, so you already have that working relationship. I mean, I think that actually is sort of a nice side benefit, but it's a real jump start to the project. Has anyone else experienced something similar? Eileen?
Yes, you were just, I mean, it's not really similar, but as you were mentioning, sometimes this difference that we can find in the project design and the actual development implementation of the project. And I'm thinking that sometimes, yes, some challenges that we can find is that we realize that this project results framework that has been prepared and designed like before the time of implementation is not we can realize that the context is changing, or sometimes you can find some little discrepancies. And I remember when I joined this team, I heard a lot about adaptive management, and I didn't really know what it was, or didn't really understood why it was important. And now I realize that, yes, it's indeed really important to have a bit of flexibility, because and then to be able to review and revise the project result framework, and to adapt it to have actually a tool that you can really use.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. And I'd be curious to hear if anyone has any experience with, it could be small or even a large change that had to be done because the context evolved. Has anyone, maybe let's hear from Cynthia. Have you experienced something like this where the project design was in one situation and then something changed and then you had to change what you were doing with the project implementation or with monitoring?
Hi, Colin. I think because I also quite new in here, but based on our project design, yeah, actually, based on our current project document, the problem is more the challenges about the fund. I mean, we have a different expectation than what we realize, something like that. But I think it's not really a big challenge in here. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, I think what I want to share about the challenge is sometimes we are forget to also report on the process. It's kind of the process versus the results of the activities. To learn on the progress, I mean, we could what our failure or our success, yeah, it's good to have the process. And sometimes we have a challenge or obstacle to document our process. And how to resolve this kind of things, we try to build some template, a simple template for monthly. It's help us to tracking, for instance, like what is your planning for this month, and what is the progress, and what is for the next month. But we have in the paper, even it's really small, and we can take a note for what is the main risk, because what happen is sometimes we really difficult to writing a report if the data is not in there, or sometimes we just make some report only for the donor report or when the audit come. I think that's one of the challenge as well, how to document it, the process, and how to provide a template, that very simple template just to put everything to learn in the process. It's not only about the result, but we can also learn from the process. That's one of the challenges.
Mm-hmm. So for this monthly work plan template that you're talking about, when did you start using that? And do you feel like it's been working, or do you feel like people are still sort of figuring it out?
Yes, especially in my past experience working with partners, this monthly template is really helped them. I mean, actually we just put what is really what we expected. For instance, like what process, what main problems you face it, why it not work as they're planning, something like that. I mean, this kind of simple template is help to document, and it's work. We feel it's really help us.
Right.
Because if like quarterly report and we did not have the data, we don't document it properly, it really difficult for us to learn, actually for the learning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the reporting, yeah, we can also have the qualitative or the quantitative. Usually, like, yes, 300 people is training, for instance. Yeah, we have already conducted the training, but it's not only the numbers, but also what is the process and the quality of the training, something like that. So yeah, that's I think that's also help to have the template, the simple template for the monthly.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. You know, we can get really caught up in tracking the numbers, you know, check the box. So, you know, we trained 30 people or 300 people or however many we need. And then we can sort of lose track of, did it work? Who were we actually engaging with? All of those process things that you're talking about that are actually really important and that really feed into the learning and strengthening our project management, getting back to that results-based management piece. Thank you for sharing, that's great. Does anyone want to add anything to that, a similar experience, or have a new challenge that you'd like to share? Aileen and Christine, yep. It's fun having two Aileens on the call.
Hi, yeah, it's not often. Hi, Aileen. So, yeah, there was something that actually linked into the other Eileen's point before, which I think we could also frame as just the more general challenge of dealing with uncertainty, right? And to start with, ours is taken from a slightly different perspective. So, of course, in all programs we deal with the uncertainty around context changing, but for us it's even in sort of like our core program activities. And that's because Partnerships for Forests is primarily a grants program, but we're framed as a business incubator. So essentially what we're doing is we're financing and providing technical support to business propositions between private sector and public sector entities that we're hoping to develop and get towards a sort of like investable proposition, so going towards commercial scale up. And being set up as an incubator, we're expecting to deal with ideas and grantees that come in at all sorts of levels of maturity, both sort of in terms of their governance structure, whether that's the arrangements between partners or their sort of like commercial maturity, and whether the proposition in itself sort of has legs, essentially. So our whole results framework and log frame monitoring and evaluation framework has to be set up around the idea that we don't know exactly where our grants, where our support are going to go, and we also don't know how long they'll stay with us, because some projects might fail at different stages. You know, the business proposition, for example, might not end up with something that's attractive to external investors. So we're sort of thinking, I mean, it's a kind of fundamental challenge to the way we work, so we'd be really interested in hearing from others their experience in terms of how you deal with not sometimes knowing exactly what activities you're going to fund at the start, so being able to construct a nice baseline that you can track along the way, and also having a very, very varied sort of range of grants and activities. And in terms of sort of how we dealt with it in the way that the program's set up from an M&E perspective, so there's two main things that I can think of, and I'll see if Christine can add anything to it afterwards. But one is that actually our results framework is very heavily oriented towards reporting through case studies. So obviously you still need to be able to sort of develop a bit of a baseline and be able to tell a story of what the situation was like at the beginning, but we know that we can go in a little bit later on in a grant and, you know, collect data, both quantitative and qualitative, through interviews in order to be able to tell a narrative about that particular grant, rather than tracking sort of quantitative indicators along the way. And the other thing is that which is maybe sort of another aspect to the challenge, is that our grantees are quite often private sector companies that are not used to doing M&E in the sort of traditional way that organizations that are heavily involved in international development, be they NGOs or you know, consultancy companies like us are. Yet we rely on them, obviously, to be working together with us on tracking the progress of their projects. So we've got a setup where we always nominate what we call a project officer, who's a member of our team that will maintain sort of quite an in-depth personal relationship with the grantee, and is the primary point of contact for all issues, whether it be grant management or communications, but also monitoring and evaluation. And therefore we have to work with them through that personal relationship to be able to build and gather, I guess, the data that we need in order to be able to report as a program. But there's, yeah, multiple different elements that come into play, all that are to do with sort of like uncertainty and not having a traditional sort of M&E setup and even understanding amongst the grantees that we work with.
Yes, so I think that we, in terms of the resources challenge that was being discussed before, we're just thinking about that. PPRF often has integrated monitoring and evaluation with other activities, maybe in ops, or M&E data collection is ideally rolled into the grant process. So they have to report alongside the M&E data in progress alongside a disbursement request. So there's a good incentive there. And yeah, we leverage data where we can. So because of the problem of like collecting baselines and projects dropping out, and that's a deliberate design feature, we leverage where we can. So M&E data in the program, in terms of our indicators, is aligned well with the kind of core operations of the project and of all the business, and the kind of, we have shared goals, which means that we have shared data. But I do think an interesting challenge is, like, because we're leveraging data and because we're taking this case study approach, we have good data sources, but it's difficult to aggregate. So like there's all this great data, but we can't do at a glance kind of impact for reporting. So I think that's an interesting challenge for us.
Yeah.
Well, you both just threw like 25 different. That's very, very rich what you just shared. And it's fascinating to hear about a different approach and the way that's structured, with, you know, being a grant making organization, but a business incubator. And I'll say one thing and then I'll open it up to everybody else. But what Aileen, what you described about having different projects that are all sort of under this umbrella, but you don't know at the beginning what the activities are going to be, and how do you build that into the at the beginning into the system. It reminded me a little bit of something that we are also facing with the Green Commodities program, at least within the UNDP structure, which is that for the purposes of UNDP, the whole Green Commodities program is just one project. And so all of the work that we do in each country is sort of under that same umbrella. And then we have to like report on what GCP did, which can get tricky when the countries are doing really different things. They're at different levels. Some are just starting, some are already finished. And then how do you track that when there's no clear sort of end of project, because we're hoping that Green Commodities program doesn't end, right? So what we've done in order to work with that reality is to be as flexible as we can be with the indicators that we choose in terms of our reporting up. And then we do treat our projects within that umbrella as unique entities. And, you know, we find whatever we can to aggregate, to Christine's point, but in terms of reporting upwards, we try to keep it really flexible and really general, because how can you really say, this project is going to end up here when something else is at a totally different point? I mean, it can be really challenging. So I think for us, that's sort of the reality of the situation. I don't know, Vanessa, if you want to add anything to that or not. You don't have to. or if anyone else wants to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our side, the one additional thing we'd add, which we've kind of said implicitly, is that we've got also the flip side is a little bit of an advantage in that we can frame, so we discussed previously as a group how aligning or really integrating M&E so that it's a core function of management and feeding in is, is a way that sort of like internally you can up the value of monitoring and evaluation within the team. And for us, sort of like externally, we can do that by, as Christine said, having indicators that demonstrate result and progress in a way that's useful for our grantees to demonstrate their business proposition, right? So these are grants that are meant to develop into investable ideas. So they need a narrative. They need to be able to track their performance in any case in order to have something concrete, a concrete data and concrete and well elaborated narrative to entice investors in and convince them. So for us, that's kind of like the saving grace, if you like, that we can work with the grantees and our partners to develop something that's going to be really useful for them, not just in terms of like sharing knowledge and learning, which is obviously more important for the community of practice at large, but really for the success of their individual projects or propositions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned a number of things when you were talking before, and then Christine, you did as well. Does anyone want to respond to any of that? Issues around data aggregation across a program.
We've got plenty more challenges otherwise.
Sorry, who's that? I thought someone was speaking, but then it cut out. All right, well, or we can move on to a new challenge if no one wants to respond to any of that. Rico, we haven't heard from you at all in this conversation. Can I call on you? Can I pick on you? You want to share a challenge that you thought of?
Yeah, cool. I will share about my challenge in this project, especially in West Kalimantan, Sintang district, about how to elaborate and collaboration with the local government to match the agenda and this project to work together and the limit or resource, especially staff or consultant to conduct this project. I think it's one of the all of challenge on my face.
Yeah, great. Definitely. Yeah. Has anyone had a similar experience? Oops. No. All right. Well, so Rico, have you in that challenge? How have you worked to address that? What have you been doing with this challenge to resolve it?
My work plan, maybe the coordination meeting with the team is important to me for the next agenda or next implementation can deliver to in all of the activity in this project. So I think the important is coordination meeting with the related stakeholder and especially and our team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we've been joined by Nikita. I think is that you?
Hello, can you hear me?
But only barely.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that I just recently joined this group, but I was doing other things in my work. Sorry for that, but I don't know. But I'm interested in this topic because monitoring and assessment or evaluation is a very important topic for our duties here at the National Fishery Institute in Ecuador.
Well, wonderful. We're glad to have you. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.
And I'm also excited that you're here because Sandra is also working on fisheries. So you guys can have a fisheries conversation bilaterally if you want.
All right.
Well, this has, I think, been a really rich discussion of challenges, and I really appreciate everyone's sharing and really thoughtful responses to what everybody has said. So I think we're going to move on unless there's anyone with anything else burning to say here. If so, jump in, or we can come into it again, come back to it. But so I want to shift gears a little bit in the discussion and move into learning. So we've talked a lot about M&E and the challenges sort of during design, maybe, or implementation. But then now moving to the next phase, once we have the information, how do we feed that back into the project, getting back to results-based management or adaptive management? And then how do you share that knowledge with other people? You can see I have some sort of guiding questions on the slide here, but this is really sort of a free discussion. So I would love to hear from anybody. Let's say starting with how do you identify learnings, and then how do you apply them back into the project? Or I'll call on someone.
Hello, this is Sandra here. I mean, I think that there is a theoretical way of doing, or I guess that probably we all know that we should do it in some way. But honestly, I think that we don't do it systematically. When we have a presentation, or like now, when we have a discussion, then we say, okay, what are the lessons learned of our process, So usually I find myself that when I have to, make a presentation, or maybe when you have to write some report, then you think about the lessons learned. So this is how I think that usually happens. Mm-hmm. Unless you organize specific activities or a route or strategy to develop these lessons. And in other experience, I learned that if you want to have some learnings, you have to try to define at the beginning what are the topics that you want to learn about. I think this is difficult because sometimes you don't know from the beginning, but it helps you to follow up, to track what are your learnings from a specific topic, because otherwise it becomes too wide, very wide, the amount of lessons that you can have in one project or whatever. So that has been my experience in general terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, it's true. We're all learning every day, right? If we spent all of our time thinking about each minute thing that we learned throughout the course of a project, we could write a whole book on it, right? So that's an interesting idea, to have some some themes that you're really focused on learning. So have you done that? Have you applied that? Or maybe, if not at the beginning of a project, maybe halfway through, have you thought, okay, these are the things that we really want to focus on moving forward for learning, or done anything along those lines?
Pardon me, can you say again?
Yeah, sorry.
The last.
What I mean is, it can be hard, as you said, to identify what you want to learn at the beginning of the project, even though that's helpful to frame it. So I wonder if you have at any point, 1 year in, 2 years in the middle of a project, if you've thought, okay, these are the topics, the 3 things or whatever we're really going to focus on for the next however many years that we have left. Have you ever done that? Because I think that's an interesting approach.
I haven't done it. I mean, I think it's a very good approach. I haven't done it. We didn't use too much time to do the learnings, but I think that when you have a monitoring system, maybe in the process of the monitoring, and when you do monitoring, I don't know, every 6 months, or you at the end you identify some of the topics that you are having some difficulties, like some constraints, and then the next time that you monitor, understanding more, next time, like, I don't know, when you have to do the report, or at least when you have to systematize the old information, probably you are going to look back about where your, the problems or the topics that you identify, and in a way you are tracking the same topics. But I haven't done it systematically. But yeah, I think it's a good approach.
Yeah, I like this idea. Maybe we'll try it and then we'll report back. Does anyone, Aileen, was that you? Aileen and Christine?
Hi. Yes, sorry, taking time with our trackpad here. Sort of building on what Sandra was saying, and also giving our own experience with it. I mean, I think definitely we have the same challenges in terms of finding the time to integrate learning as one additional element of the program, and what we need to do and trying to integrate it. I mean, one of the things that I think is kind of good practice within our program, Punches of Forest, which I haven't seen in many of the other programs I've worked on, is that within our results framework, we've actually integrated our learning questions. So as Sandra was saying, trying to be quite specific about the questions that we're going to prioritize as our learning themes. So they're in there as sort of like a, essentially a guiding framework for what we're going to be looking at from a knowledge and learning perspective, in addition to our results reporting. And then also similarly, I mean, it's a fairly basic thing, but I think it helps just, again, increase the understanding of the value of learning within the team, but like a whole output of our results framework is around what we framed as learning, collaboration, and leadership. So it's both on internal learning and also sharing that learning externally in a way that we can demonstrate our own impact and provide sort of leadership within the community of practice. And I think one of the reasons we're, again, able to do that is the specificity, the particularities of our program. So like we were saying, we're funding lots of little pilots and different types of projects and propositions. And so we understand that we're not necessarily going to be able to tell a big impact story in terms of, in our case, hectares of avoided deforestation. But what could be really valuable is if we're able to package up the learning from the models that have been piloted and communicate those. That's how we can demonstrate an impact that's greater than sort of some of our parts, as the saying goes. So for us, it's really embedded in our whole pathway to impact at scale.
So what's an example of a guiding question that would be incorporated into the results framework?
So for us, a lot of them are around, well, we've got them grouped into different themes. So we've got five themes, and that includes things that are, so we have one theme, for example, that's around program management and operational learning. So that's the one that's like more focused on how we're actually setting up and managing our grant facility. And that's sort of more targeted, I guess, at the client, at the donor, so that can inform future investments on their side. But other ones are around, for example, how you demonstrate market leadership. So it's really looking into the specifics of the models that are being piloted, the business models that are being piloted, and that's quite different from the indicators within our results framework, which are more around, let's say, more sort of like classic elements, policies that have changed, or hectares that have been brought under sustainable land use, or improved gender equality. Now with the learning questions, we're looking more to sort of like dissect processes and dissect the results of, okay, this is a successful business model, what makes it successful, which wouldn't be fully captured within the indicators themselves. That makes sense. Probably a bit jargony, my explanation.
No, that's great. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
With those learning questions, I think, and the reports were developed, well, the ones this year were developed in collaboration with the external evaluators.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what we've got, I don't know how common this is with other donors now. We work a lot with UK government, and what UK government have been doing more and more in the programs that they fund is, instead of commissioning sort of ex post evaluation of their programs, they tend to bring them online in the early years and have them running parallel, so more like a real-time evaluation. So you call it like an external evaluator. This is part of the sort of like adaptive management and learning as well. So we do work very closely with them as well. So we have an additional benefit that we can leverage their resource and the fact that they're focused very much on learning, both for improving performance and for sharing to the wider community of practice. Yeah, that's a good point. So, for example, the learning questions are shared with them and are sort of part of the broader evaluative framework that DIP and our donor have in mind.
That's great. That is a different approach than, I promise not to talk too much about UNDP, but now here I am doing it. With our midterm reviews, the reviewer, the external evaluator, will make some recommendations, or that then would be fed back in terms of adaptive management and results-based management. It'd be fed back into the project for the second half, but there's no formal process for those guiding questions as far as I know, although certain project managers or the technical advisors might say these are things that we are most curious about. But so that's really interesting. Does anyone else have a different way that they extract learning, or ways that you might apply learning back into the project?
Well, I just want to say something about this, because as a research institution, our learning is basically day by day, and this is from the field where we collect data and where we have the chance to interact with fishers in this case, but also from different meetings that we have with fishers, but also with people from the industry, so from the fishing industry. So those things led us to learn to improve our learnings and for improving the monitoring, but also the assessment. As you know, this is basically scientific research regarding the fishes. So we need to know also about how the stock of the different fishes are. So we learn from different parts. I mean, learning from the stakeholders, but also learning from the data what we collect. So in order to improve our monitoring, but also to improve better management, in this case for the fishing resources as well as for the people who are involved in this resource.
That's great. Sorry, Miriam, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that implementing a project is always a process of learning, especially when we work with different stakeholders. It is very, very important. The project always generates products or tools or instruments. I think how in the process of learning, how institutions or government agencies use and appropriate the product is one of the learning process. I think this is very important because in this way you create, as a project create capacities to the stakeholders who are involved. In this sense, I mean that is always a learning process. A project always has to be. It's not a very active project.
Well, I agree completely, and I think you're right. And I think what's a challenge is that's linked to that is if you have a results framework that you've committed to, you've signed a legal document with the government, and then you learn something in the project, and you need to figure out how to apply that learning while still meeting the commitment, right? So how, like, have you had any experiences that you can share along those lines of needing to tweak something based on what you've learned?
How to deal with different, how to coordinate, how to deal with a different stakeholders, different institutions that you have to coordinate. You have to adapt on the way, because sometimes even though it's the same government, you have one institution work in one way, the other in another way, and then you have to go there, learning how how your products can impact the result of the project.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So I feel like there's some people being very quiet. Aileen, sure. And I can't always see all the videos from my screen, so I'll call on you if I wave, if I see you waving, but also just feel free to jump in. So
I can share how we are trying to extract learnings in our project, or the production and the adaptive management and learning project that we're working on under the Good Growth Partnership. So we integrate. We are doing internally quarterly monitoring progress reports, and as part of these reports, some questions about lessons learned have been integrated, and I think it's really important. It's a process that is taking a bit of time, because you of course have to ask yourself, okay, what did I learn during the past months, and to actually write it. But I think it's really useful to document it, because it's then easier to share what you learned. And that's, I find it myself a really useful exercise to do it on a quarterly basis and not only on an annual basis, for example, because I'm sure that I would have forgotten maybe some small lesson learned, but still valuable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I mean, it can also be interesting to think back and realize that 6 months ago, we actually thought something totally different, right? Because we always are incorporating learning. And so I think we all sort of naturally calibrate to a sort of new normal. And so you think back and you're like, oh yeah, we did learn that thing, if you're not sort of keeping track of it throughout the process. That's great. So how about let's shift a little bit to how have you shared knowledge with other projects or teams? I think we can get pretty siloed sometimes, but Does anyone have an experience that they want to share or a challenge that they have experienced with figuring out how to share the best practices or any sort of major takeaways from the projects?
Usually we share, the best way is sharing products. For example, in the project I just finished, we share with the whole organization the national wetland inventory. And it's a very, very big product, a very nice product also, that is used for different government agencies. It's one of the form, and then we send the products, the maps, and everything to them. Mm-hmm. And then we explain sometimes, if you have that challenge, to explain to the institution how was built, how was constructed, and it's a management tool for land. Mm-hmm. It's one way to sharing the products. More than send a book or something, is sharing the products.
Yeah, yes. Something useful, something practical. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Let's take one more comment on this before we move on. I'm conscious of time. If there's any last words someone wants to say about learning.
Hi, Colin. It's me, Cynthia.
Great.
Okay, I think about learning, one thing we learn in Indonesia, it's also how to document it, the commitment of the government, because we are developing the policy. I mean, we're developing the national action plan, and for the government policy, it takes time. So, I mean, like, we need 2 years, 3 years, or even 5 years for the legalization. So that kind of things we need to really learn. I mean, for instance, like, what is the achievement? I mean, for when we talk about the government put a good commitment, so we need to explain what is the good commitment. For instance, we can have it some official letter from the high official instruction to the provincial government for establish some multi-stakeholders platform and establish some provincial action plan. I mean, that kind of things, both of the letter of or the process, we need to document it in the process, especially when the project is implement some good governance on or related with developing some policy, because it takes time. And I think it really good learning process to document it all the process until the government legalize or endorse the policy itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole sort of learning stream in and of itself, isn't it? Just, you know, how do we track government commitments and then the adherence to the commitments? Definitely something important. Thank you for that point, and thank you everyone for all of the other points. That was really, really great. So just thinking about next steps in this learning stream, the next workshop that we're going to be having is on November 28th, and it's going to be specific to monitoring national commodity platforms, and we'll also touch on monitoring national action plans. So put that on your calendar if you're interested in attending. And if there are other specific issues, other topics, then please let me know. You know, we can absolutely put something together. Again, this learning stream is really intended to be for us here, this community in this stream, and so we want it to be really relevant. So let me know if there's something that you would like a discussion about. You can just send me an email or, you know, however. If anyone has any ideas right now, you can throw them out. But.
Can we just ask a quick question on the workshop on the 28th of November? Because that sounds really interesting for our colleagues in Ghana who are doing a lot of work around cocoa and oil palm. But in I think there's a sort of timetable sheet that was sent around, a calendar of workshops, it's listed as being in Spanish, which they would struggle with. So I just wanted to check if it will be in English or in Spanish, so we can advise if they could attend or not.
I will be leading that one. It will be in English.
Okay.
This was added to the calendar a little bit later, so I don't know if you have the most recent version of the calendar that was sent out, but I'll send it around in my follow-up to make sure everyone has it. I'm not sure if the one that's listed in Spanish is this same one, or it might be one of the ones from
actually, no, yes, you're right. I think maybe we're reading it incorrectly, actually. I was looking at, yeah, I think I was looking at the wrong one, so my mistake, sorry.
Okay, no, not at all. That's a good point, because the calendar was updated. So yeah, so this will be in English, and I would absolutely love to have people from Ghana. And so let us know who you think might want to join, and then Matthias can get in touch about, you know, an orientation call, or and these workshops are also open to people who haven't done the orientation call, if it's sort of a one-off specific thing, but we really want to orient them towards people who are making an investment in the work stream and in the community. And so the orientation call is an important next step, or first step, excuse me, for that. So let's see, for us, please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or comments or feedback or ideas for next workshops, and I will get back to you. We do have a Google Drive set up for the entire community of practice, and there's a special folder for the M&E stream. Right now it's empty, so don't check it out just yet, but we're going to put the recording for this workshop in there, and other resources and tools as they come up. And please feel free to share any examples of products like the one you mentioned, Miriam, would be really interesting to see, or you know, any sort of other tools that you think would be relevant. And you have each other's email addresses, so please you know, get to know one another. If there's anyone who hasn't completed the learning survey, I encourage you to do that as well. I think most people on this call have done it, but not everyone. And I think that's it. Does anyone have any last comments? No? Great. Or Christine, did you want to?
Just to say that I've really enjoyed this, and thank you.
Well, great. I really appreciate everyone's sincere contributions and engagement in the conversation. I think it was a really rich discussion. So thank you to all of you, and we'll be in touch. Enjoy the rest of your days and nights. And get some
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Nice talking to you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
See you around. Bye-bye.
Bye, Matthias.
Bye-bye.
Bye.